If you're a diehard Browns fan and love breaking down the game like we do, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you never miss a blitz. The NFL trade deadline always feels like a roller coaster, but this year's version might just take the cake for the wildest ride we've seen in a long time. From shocking blockbuster deals to sneaky depth moves that only insiders saw coming, the league has been buzzing with chaos. And right in the middle of that storm, the Cleveland Browns quietly slipped in one of those moves that might not light up your phone with breaking news alerts, but could end up being one of those smart business-type trades that contenders love to make. With minutes ticking down before the deadline hit, the Browns decided to part ways with recent free agent pickup Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, sending him and a 2026 seventh-round pick to the Chicago Bears in exchange for a 2026 sixth-rounder. On paper, it looks small. In the grand scheme of things, though, this tells a story about both teams and how they see themselves heading into the second half of the season. Let's start with Cleveland. The Browns have been sitting in that strange middle ground all year, a team good enough to dream big, but also cautious enough to know that a single injury or two can derail everything. There's been endless speculation about whether they'd be buyers or sellers at the deadline. Would they cash in on some veterans like Shelby Harris or Jerome Ford? Or would they go all in, grab a young playmaker, and push harder for a postseason run? Turns out, they chose something right down the middle, not a headline grabber, but a move that makes practical sense. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who signed with Cleveland this past offseason on a one-year, $4.75 million deal, never quite found his rhythm in the Dawg Pound. With a defensive front anchored by Myles Garrett, who's once again playing like a man possessed, and strong supporting work from Alex Wright, Isaiah McGuire, and Cameron Thomas, there just wasn't much room left for the newcomer. Tryon-Shoyinka saw only 31 defensive snaps across 8 games, barely a blip in the rotation. It's not entirely fair to judge a player on such limited reps, but in that small sample, he didn't exactly flash anything that forced the coaching staff to expand his role. Outside of a couple decent pressures in the Steelers game, his name rarely came up during broadcasts or film breakdowns. And for a front office like Cleveland's, that kind of under-the-radar contribution is exactly what prompts a move like this one. When you're deep at a position, every roster spot and every draft asset has value. So flipping an underused edge rusher and upgrading a late-round pick in the process is simply a tidy bit of business. But let's not forget, every trade has two sides. While Cleveland was tightening up its asset management, the Bears were reacting to an urgent need. Chicago's defense has actually been one of the league's most surprising units this season. After years of inconsistency, they've finally started to find a balance between youth and experience. Sitting at 5-3, they're in legitimate playoff contention, and head coach Matt Eberflus knows how fragile that can be when injuries start piling up. Losing Dayo Odeyingbo, their prized free agent signing and arguably their most disruptive edge rusher, to a season-ending Achilles injury was a massive blow. You can't just replace a guy like that overnight. But you can try to plug the hole, and that's exactly what this deal represents for Chicago. For the Bears, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka is a lottery ticket, low risk, potentially high reward. They're not giving up anything of serious value, and if he clicks in their system, suddenly they've found a capable rotational piece to help steady the pass rush. Remember, this is a player who was once a first-round pick by the Buccaneers back in 2021. He's got athleticism, length, and a solid motor. The raw ingredients are all there. Sometimes, all a player like that needs is a change of scenery and a new voice in the locker room. Cleveland just didn't have the snaps to offer. Chicago does. And given the state of their defensive front, Tryon-Shoyinka is going to get his chance to prove he still belongs in that conversation of young defenders trying to reclaim their early potential. Zooming out a bit, this trade also says something about how Cleveland is managing its long-term strategy. The Browns are sitting on a treasure chest of draft capital right now. They already hold all of their own picks for next year, plus an extra first-rounder, 2 fifths, 3 sixths, and 2 sevenths. That's not just depth, that's flexibility. It gives them options, whether they want to move up in the draft, swing a trade next offseason, or simply keep stockpiling young talent to supplement a roster that's becoming increasingly expensive at the top. Moves like this one, minor as they may seem, are part of that philosophy. You never want to lose an asset for nothing, even if it's a player who barely saw the field. Turning that into a slightly better draft pick is just smart roster economics. What's also worth noting here is how this fits into the broader theme of an absolutely wild trade deadline. Just hours before Cleveland's move, we saw the Colts send shockwaves through the league by acquiring cornerback Sauce Gardner from the Jets in exchange for 2 first-round picks and wide receiver Adonai Mitchell. That's the kind of trade that changes the balance of power in the AFC overnight. Add to that the earlier deals involving players like Jakobi Meyers, Rashid Shaheed, and Jalen Phillips, and you've got a league that's fully embraced the idea that mid-season trades can redefine a team's fate. Cleveland's deal won't make ESPN's top headlines, but it's a reminder that even the smaller moves matter when you're building a contender. And if we're being honest, there's also something refreshing about the Browns' restraint. In an era when teams are either recklessly all-in or blatantly tanking, Cleveland managed to thread the needle. They didn't overpay for a splashy addition that might disrupt chemistry. They didn't panic and unload veterans for pennies on the dollar. They simply made a calculated adjustment to their depth chart and moved on. That's how good franchises operate. It's not always glamorous, but it's how you stay competitive year after year. Now, for Chicago, this is where things get interesting. The Bears fan base has been starving for meaningful football in November for what feels like forever. Sitting above .500 and sniffing at a potential wild-card spot has the city buzzing again. The loss of Odeyingbo hurt, no doubt, but General Manager Ryan Poles acted fast to address it. He knows what this season means for the locker room and the coaching staff. Bringing in Tryon Shoyinka isn't about making a headline. It's about showing the team that management still believes in the mission. It's about sending a message. We're not folding. We're not settling. We're going to fight. And that mentality can go a long way, especially in a city like Chicago where grit and perseverance are part of the sport's DNA. Of course, the big question now is whether Tryon Shoyinka can take advantage of this fresh start. In Tampa Bay, he showed flashes, moments where his speed and burst jumped off the tape. But consistency was always the issue. If the Bears' defensive staff can simplify his role, maybe focus him purely on third-down rush packages, there's a chance he finds a rhythm and makes some noise down the stretch. He's still only 26, still athletic, and still has the kind of frame that defensive coaches drool over. The Bears aren't asking him to be a savior. They just need him to contribute, to help fill the void left by an injured starter, and maybe, just maybe, to rediscover the fire that made him a first-round talent in the first place. Meanwhile, back in Cleveland, the focus now shifts to maintaining momentum. The defense remains the heart and soul of this team, and as long as Myles Garrett is terrorizing quarterbacks, they'll be in every game. The offense, though, continues to be a work in progress. And that's where those extra draft picks and future assets could really pay off. Because if the Browns can pair this elite defense with a more dynamic offensive identity next year, suddenly they're not just a playoff team. They're a legitimate Super Bowl threat. At the end of the day, trades like this one remind us that NFL rosters are living, breathing things. They evolve constantly, shaped by injuries, opportunities, and front office philosophies. The Browns and Bears may be operating on different timelines, but both are trying to do the same thing: build something sustainable. Cleveland's playing the long game, stacking assets and fine-tuning its depth chart. Chicago's fighting for the now, trying to keep the dream alive in a season that's finally trending upward. And that's what makes the NFL so endlessly fascinating. Every move, no matter how small, is part of a larger story, one that could look very different by the time we get to January. So yes, when the dust settles on this year's chaotic trade deadline, the headlines will probably focus on Sauce Gardner in Indy or Jalen Phillips finding a new home. But tucked quietly beneath those blockbuster deals sits a modest transaction between Cleveland and Chicago, a reminder that sometimes it's the little moves that tell the biggest truths. The Browns, ever pragmatic, keep planning for the future. The Bears, ever hopeful, refuse to give up on the present. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Tryon Shoyinka gets one more shot to prove that his story in the NFL is far from finished. Enjoying the content so far? Smash that like button and drop your take in the comments. We want to hear what you think about the Browns this season. Shockwaves are rippling through the NFL, and Cleveland Browns fans are still trying to catch their breath after what can only be described as a seismic shakeup in their roster. The news broke like a bombshell late last night, sending the Browns faithful into a whirlwind of disbelief anger, and confusion. David NJOKU, the team's star tight end, a player many considered untouchable and a cornerstone of Cleveland's offensive schemes, has been traded. The details are still murky, but sources close to the front office suggest that the deal, which reportedly involves multiple draft picks and another player, could reshape the Browns' strategy for the upcoming season entirely. For fans who have watched NJOKU evolve into one of the league's most dynamic tight ends, the reaction is visceral. Social media exploded almost immediately, with hashtags trending nationwide, all mourning the sudden departure of a player who was not only a game-changer on the field, but also a vocal presence in the locker room. The intensity of the backlash is palpable, with fan forums lighting up like fireworks, full of speculation, frustration, and, in some corners, outright fury at management's decision-making. The shock is amplified by the timing. With the season approaching and the Browns having shown flashes of brilliance in previous campaigns, letting go of NJOKU now seems, to many supporters, an incomprehensible gamble. People are asking, was it a financial decision, a philosophical shift in offensive strategy, or something deeper behind the scenes? Insiders hint that tensions may have been simmering for months, that NJOKU and the front office were not entirely aligned on the team's direction, but few expected it to end in a trade that shakes the very core of the franchise. Analysts are scrambling to interpret the move. Some argue that this is a bold, forward-looking maneuver, aimed at freeing cap space to pursue bigger offensive targets or defensive reinforcements, while others are not shy about calling it reckless, risking not only the immediate chemistry of the team, but also the trust of the fan base. The Browns have not provided a full explanation, only releasing a brief statement acknowledging the trade and wishing NJOKU well in his future endeavors. Yet, the brevity of the statement has done little to calm the storm. In fact, it seems to have fanned the flames, giving rise to countless theories. Could this be the start of a wider roster shakeup? Are other key players on the bubble? Or is it a signal that the Browns are quietly reshaping their identity in a more radical way than anyone suspected? Pundits and commentators are already weighing in. Some highlight NJOKU's explosive athleticism, noting how his combination of size, speed, and catching ability made him a nightmare matchup for defenses. His departure leaves a significant void, not just statistically, but psychologically, as he was considered a leader in the locker room and a player whose energy could lift the entire team. Meanwhile, opposing teams are surely taking notes. A player like NJOKU landing elsewhere could alter defensive schematics across the league, forcing coordinators to adjust their plans for a talent that has suddenly become available. From a purely football standpoint, this trade has ramifications far beyond Cleveland. Yet, the human element cannot be ignored. Fans who have invested years of loyalty, watching games in freezing cold stadiums, cheering through heartbreaks and narrow victories, feel betrayed. NJOKU was more than a player. He was a symbol of hope, a tangible link to the Browns' dreams of playoff glory. Now, many are left grappling with uncertainty and anger. In bars, living rooms, and online spaces, conversations revolve around the what-ifs. What if NJOKU stays? What if the front office had waited? What if this is the beginning of something much bigger? The emotions are raw, unfiltered, and intense, reflecting the deep connection fans have to their team and the players who define it. Behind the scenes, reports suggest that negotiations were intense, conducted quietly over the past few weeks, with the front office meticulously weighing options. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was calculated, strategic, and, depending on your perspective, either visionary or disastrous. Rumors abound about the compensation received, with some insiders claiming the Browns secured future draft flexibility, while others whisper about player swaps that could bring immediate talent to key positions. Each new detail only fuels speculation, as fans try to decipher whether this trade signals a rebuild, a retool, or simply a shocking gamble. The timing of the announcement, coming on a quiet weekday night, also feels calculated, as if the front office anticipated a delayed public reaction, but social media has no patience for subtlety. Within minutes, videos, memes, and fiery commentaries were circulating, capturing the collective outrage of a fanbase that feels blindsided. Sports networks have dedicated entire segments to dissecting the move, featuring former players, coaches, and analysts, each trying to project the potential consequences. The consensus is clear. NJOKU's departure is a major turning point, not just for the Browns, but for the entire NFL landscape. As fans process the reality, debates rage. Is this trade the beginning of a new era, one where the Browns aim to be more unpredictable and flexible in their roster management? Or is it a cautionary tale of management overreach, a move that risks alienating the very supporters who sustain the team? Conversations about leadership, player loyalty, and the business of sports dominate, reflecting how intertwined emotional investment and strategic decisions are in modern football. And while many reactions are fueled by emotion, some cautiously hint at potential upsides. Could this free up opportunities for younger players to step into starring roles? Might a different offensive strategy emerge, one that capitalizes on speed, versatility, or unexpected formations? The uncertainty is part of the drama, part of what makes sports so compelling, but it does little to soothe fans already in a state of shock. Meanwhile, David NJOKU himself has remained remarkably understated, sharing only cryptic messages on social media, fueling curiosity and speculation about his next destination. Will he thrive in a new environment, perhaps unlocking his full potential on a team that has been yearning for a dynamic playmaker? Or will the shadow of this sudden trade linger, a reminder of how abruptly the tides can turn in professional sports? The story is far from over. Each passing day will likely bring leaks, clarifications, and new angles. But for now, the narrative is dominated by disbelief and fervent discussion. The Cleveland Browns, once perceived as a team on a steady, albeit challenging, path, now face a new chapter defined by uncertainty, bold moves, and the undeniable absence of a star player. For fans, the experience is raw and personal, a blend of shock, disappointment, and cautious hope. They are left with memories of NJOKU's electrifying plays, his passion on the field, and the palpable sense that anything could happen next. The trade, more than just a roster adjustment, has become a cultural moment in the NFL, one that underscores the emotional stakes of the sport and the volatility of even the most seemingly stable franchises. As the league reacts and speculation intensifies, one thing is certain: the name David NJOKU will dominate headlines, conversations, and debates for weeks to come, and Cleveland fans will continue to wrestle with the reality of a world where their beloved tight end no longer wears the brown and orange. The shock is undeniable, the fury is real, and the rumors are endless. The Browns and the NFL at large have entered a period of suspense, with the next moves carrying the weight of high stakes, intense scrutiny, and the passionate voices of fans unwilling to accept anything less than clarity. In the end, this isn't just a trade. It's a statement, a spark, and perhaps the beginning of a story that will define not just a season, but the very identity of a team and the loyalty of its supporters. And as the chatter continues, one cannot help but wonder, what truly comes next in this saga that has gripped the hearts of Cleveland, rattled the league, and left everyone questioning the future of one of football's most explosive talents? The shock may fade, but the ripple effects will be felt for a long time, making this trade an unforgettable chapter in the annals of the NFL and a vivid example of how the game off the field can be just as dramatic as the one on it. Thanks for riding with us on another Browns Blitz. If you liked the video, share it with a fellow fan, hit subscribe, and ring that bell so you're always part of the Dawg Pound conversation. Go Browns!